Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here. I think I'm your first manufacturer that's speaking today, and we certainly appreciate the attendance and the opportunity for you to be able to kick the tires on some of the products. I want to talk to you this morning a little bit about prefabrication. Now, sometimes there's a connotation with that, and we want to try to dispel or answer some questions about that and just talk about what's available in the industry, not so much just from SteelCell of North America, but what does prefab mean? What are we trying to accomplish with that? There are a lot of articles now. If you do a little Google search, you'll see it's a very hot topic all across construction for various reasons, but I was reading an article on Marriott Properties the other day has decided that at least 13% of their new construction is going to be based around modular prefabricated components. And you know, we're in a nice, beautiful Marriott hotel here, and that in itself should tell you a little bit. We're not really sacrificing anything by doing that. We're saving money, saving speed, and we're having a lot of issues we're dealing with. But I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity and are kind of on the fence about, you know, should my jail project go prefab or not, to really read some of what's going on. It's not really that new a concept. I pulled a few quotes out that I thought were interesting, and I won't necessarily read them to you, but the very first one, you know, it's a concept. Would you buy a car now if you really bought the car and it came in, you know, how many million pieces and a crew of 20 showed up on your property to build it? We would think that's comical. The second quote is speaking to, you know, the connotation I think a lot of people have sometimes is a modular school classroom. You know, the scourge of the taxpayer is, you know, our kids are in school and here comes these trailers in for our kids to go to school. Actually, I want to, you know, correct that connotation. You can read the quote, and I want to point out a couple of things here. In that article on Construction World, they also note some of the key reasons to use prefab, or its eco-friendliness, financial savings, and construction safety. Now, we had an interesting side conversation this morning about the eco-friendliness, or green. What does it really mean to be green? Well, if prefabrication is done right, I can bring you a product, you know, as complete as it makes sense, drop it on the site, and you don't have packaging, banding, pallets, boxes, all this stuff to dispose of. So, you know, whether it's necessarily LEED or green, it's kind of smart. You know, it's bring something and don't leave a bunch of extra trash with it. And that may not seem like a huge concept, but let's say you're building a 600-bed facility. When you've got 600 boxes for toilets, and you've got 600 boxes for locks, and you've got 600 boxes for mirrors, that adds up. You're paying for that. You're paying for that garbage disposal. Probably the key reason to have a conversation about prefabrication is the last quote. 73% of the contractors interviewed, the people that would be building your jails, and I'm sure it stretches down to the subcontractors, are looking for people or have a shortage of people. But the same number, 73, are expecting more work. So they're going to have more work and they need people. How do we accomplish that? Prefabrication is one way we do that. So we're a departure from this. This is what I think of in my mind, and there's still some areas even with a prefab-based jail that you'll see this, but conventional construction means to me pallets and pallets of CMU block. It means wet floors, dirty floors. It means, you know, maybe on opening day we can dig down and get to the original floor that we paid for to have a brand new floor that's now really well used and wet. You know, we're putting a lot of high-end products and high-end electronics into wet walls, and we're trying to eliminate some of that. This is an Indiana shower unit. I want to say it's Fort Wayne. And conventional construction, you know, are we giving up quality to go to prefab? Well, I would argue that you're gaining quality because, really in a site-built thing, you've got so many dissimilar materials in a very, unforgiving environment. It's going to be raining on the job site. You've got a contractor over here cutting something, creating dust, and you're trying to paint. So we want to eliminate that in the detention areas as much as possible. We, in particular, promote a steel wall to weld a steel door and frame into because of these reasons. I mean, probably this looks familiar to somebody. We've got a well-worn door that just can't never, get adjusted correctly, and we try 4 or 5 different fixes. Who knows if that wall was ever constructed completely correctly? How do we know it was filled with grout and rebar, as architectural specifications say? Kind of hard to tell once it's built. And then this is one of my favorite pictures. Obviously a pretty brand new jail. Floor's not dirty and the paint looks like it's only the first coat. Somebody my size probably sat down on that bunk and bam, into the floor. Because we missed some quality control. We didn't know that those embeds were in properly and correctly. So you see those type things. Why do you see them? Is it because your architectural and your CM team didn't want to do the job right? No. But they probably have bunks being installed in 200 locations at one time, and you just can't get to you can't inspect every location at one time. Now, back to the connotation of the modular classrooms. This is reality. This is a prefab day room. The building on the upper right is a building designed utilizing prefab cells and other products. So we're not giving up anything. We're actually probably increasing the quality a good bit. They don't all have to be nice, neat, square cell boxes. These are control rooms going in, areas that maybe the corridors, the sally ports going in, those are prefab too. And look at the picture on the right. That's probably the same core area as the picture that I first showed you, the dirty wet area. That's the difference in modern prefab versus conventional construction. There are multiple types of prefabricated product, and there are different levels that you can get things prefabricated. It's my belief, it's our industry's belief, is you want to get as much prefabricated as makes sense. What does that mean? Well, it's going to vary from project to project. But these are some of the other prominent. You heard Joe's presentation earlier. We do a modular SteelCell. There are a couple of companies that do a modular precast concrete cell, and there are companies that do a wall panel cell, and it's made out of similar material, but it's erected on the job site. These are all methods of prefabrication. The prefab steel options, a little bit lighter weight, well, a lot lighter weight than concrete, a little bit lighter weight than the wall panel systems, but my partner at work kind of gets mad when I say this, but I say if you want it pink and fluffy, you can get it. Now we might advise you against that, but you can get it. So we have a lot of options in the steel world. As I said, typically we're going to come, prefab done right, it's going to bring you a product and not leave you any trash. So as you can see, we're unloading these prefabricated cells. There's no plastic around them. There's no boards. There's no banding, no strapping. This is all, the truckers' tarps that will protect them from the rain and road grime as they're going up the road, and their straps, and they go back with the truck. So pretty clean job site. Yes?
Can you just say a word about, as it relates to the weight, what the impact of that is?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. I've got a question on the weights. They're a different system and what the weights do. A 80 square foot, which is a typical ACA standard for a 2-person cell, is going to weigh in the 28 to 30,000 pound range if you do it out of CMU block or precast concrete. If you do it in one of the lighter steel systems, you're talking about 4,800 pounds to maybe the wall panels with grout in them at 8,000 or 9,000 pounds. And if you're in an urban area, or even if you're just in a rural area with issues that you need to address with your soil, you know, probably not going to put a gel on a prime piece of land. It could be we put them on landfills, different places. It's usually a place that nobody else wants to utilize. Or it's a downtown area where you're going vertical. Those weights will have a significant impact on how deep you have to go to hold up the building. If you can imagine, we've got a 200 cell project. 200 times roughly 5,000 pounds versus 200 times roughly 30,000 pounds. There's a substantial amount that goes into the ground to hold up, you know, either building, but it's more the heavier the units go in. So weighs into some of your determining factors on how you're going to proceed with your facility. We see a lot of different schedules. You can put the cells and the prefab units on the slab right after the slab's poured. Probably not ideal to sit in the weather, and some of the winters are a little bit harsher, or you know, they can be brought into partially constructed buildings, which is probably more typical. This is in process. These cells were installed with the roof already up, so you can get everything dried in, you can get your roof up without a lot of obstructions on the floor, and then start populating the building with the prefab units. A finished area. A lot of times the prefab units are going to utilize a common rear plumbing and mechanical chase. This does several things. It allows some of the utilities to actually be above the slab, and not the first thing you do is lay all the piping and hope it hits a door opening for an electrical connection to a lock box or an intercom. This will also allow you a couple things as an owner. You're going to have pretty easy access for maintenance and diagnosing problems. A water leak that's in a concrete slab, when do you really see it? Well, when the moisture is built up enough, and where does it really coming from? You know, good luck. You know it's in this general area. Here, most of that's going to be above ground. Obviously, waste is going to be below ground, but generally waste is not pressurized, so unless you have a building settling problem, you probably are going to see most of your issues above slab. And then they're also going to be easier to fix. Now, when you're doing general maintenance, or hopefully you're doing some preventive maintenance, you're also going to be able to come into an area with toolboxes that isn't an inmate area. I think one of the reasons we started really getting behind the rear chase design was we were hearing from those of you wearing a badge saying, you know, the worst thing that could ever happen is for us to have to check in a toolbox, count all the tools, then hopefully we get the same count of tools going back, and hopefully we didn't miss anything during the count, because we don't want a flathead screwdriver missing. And then the prefab options really go much beyond, as I've said, much beyond just a cell. So when you're utilizing a prefab building design or method, what you want to do is you want to look at any area of the building that really makes sense to fabricate off-site. Sometimes control rooms are one of the most complex structures that can be built, or parts of the structure that can be built on the job site. A lot of times we have, hopefully I'm going to, nope, it's not going to work, but you can see that you have hollow metal, very expensive, very hard to get, detention hollow metal frames that are sitting on an angle sometimes. Well, we have methods that we can create a much cleaner design, a much more reliable design, instead of having the frames fabricated in Georgia or South Dakota, the mason working on the site, and you just hope that it all fits together in the middle of your operational job site. These are options that you have in the prefab world now. Just some pictures of, you know, what are we getting, what are we giving up? Is it going to be something less? Well, this is an interior picture in the upper right-hand corner during construction, and then as they're ready to move in. So as you see, you're getting as nice or nicer finishes than you would get from conventional construction. You know, if a section like the control room is going to be prefab, you know, we have to weigh what we'll do on site versus what it costs to ship larger units up. So a lot of times we'll ship these large units in sections. You would never know that they were shipped in sections after it's complete and operational. Just a few more pictures. The picture on the right is a recent project. There's a video outside that you might have an opportunity to see where we were in downtown Nashville. We're installing cells on the 4th floor, really off an operational street. And again, these are just some of the efficiencies that, you know, correct prefab construction can allow a project. Now, why go prefab? We've already talked first about the lack of labor. And I'm just telling you this, that, you know, I used to think I was the younger crowd. I'm not the younger crowd anymore. Every day I get farther away from that. But this new generation would rather have a locker in my plant than a suitcase and a toolbox on the back of his truck driving to who knows where today. So, you know, that is a job some people like, but fewer and fewer. So what we're finding is that some of our skilled labor, we can still attract them to a plant environment, and that's what we're doing. So we're just bringing some of the construction site to the plant. Now, if it's done right, this is a key thing, you can save time. And by the time, and I'm sure anyone in here that's wearing a badge that's waiting for a jail would take a month, 2 months, 6 months knocked off because they've been probably waiting years to get the thing rolling. So we're about saving time. And then the construction guys can tell you that every day your job is under construction, your county's paying for people to be on the site, manage the site, insure the site for construction. So we're talking about eliminating or shortening time. How does that happen? We're able in the detention world to address the detention details, build a prefabricated portion of the jail before your site is even ready to receive one. So shortly after the design process, just as soon as we know what you want, we can begin to fabricate the product, and it can sit and stage and be ready when the site is ready. Now, when we roll in, we can install, Joe, your crew's been installing 30 a day.
Yeah, 30 to 35.
One of the pictures you'll see outside is a good example of success in prefab. You have the entire project's worth of cell boxes installed in a time-lapse video. Garmon Construction did this. A time-lapse video while about 10 or 12 masons get 2 courses of straight-run block. That's the speed savings. And all that time saved will reduce your price and will get you the keys and allow you to move inmates into your, you know, desperately needed project that much sooner. Just some, you know, different options. One of my favorite pictures really that we have is this picture on the lower right. Instead of a dorm with 64 beds in a room like this and you can't see what's going on over there, you know, this is something that you can afford to do with modular. This is a stacked system where you get the same vision in a stacked pod, you know, 1 and 2 person cell, but you can see into every, you know, dorm area, and you have a little sleeping partition. These are the type of enhancements that you can have when you have the cost savings of prefabricated and the time savings that reduce the cost as well. Now, moving into the future, probably one of the best benefits, and you'll get to see this exact demo unit, is that we're able to interact. We like to have people come down to the plant, kick the tires. I'm sure other legit manufacturers like to do the same, but we hear, and a lot of our design development comes from, you know, jail administrators saying, we need this. Could you do this? How can you provide this? Well, in the most drawn out portion of that is really designing a new environment. And we're starting to see this, and so we've modeled it, mocked it up. We have a demo unit outside, a little more normative environment for, mental health patients, or those that are, we heard very early on, 98% of people get out. So how are we preparing them to not come back? So some of these things, and this particular unit is for a youth. And how are we treating the youth? Are we treating them to be a future adult criminal, or are we trying to get them to adjust and be a normal law-abiding adult? So you can check these things out, and I'm not advocating your project needs these, but we're going to start seeing these more and more. With all of our mental health people in the county jails, we're going to have to address it or just keep building and building, and your new 600 beds that you're needing are going to be 1,600 before you know it. We're also able to do some things with a little higher quality and in a little better condition. So just things like a shower. Conventional method, you'll be lucky if you really do get a year warranty on it, but we're able to provide up to 10-year warranties on something that we can do in a controlled factory environment. And every manufacturer uses something different. We, in particular, use a product from Sherwin-Williams where if it's installed in our factory under our controlled conditions, we can offer up to 10-year warranties for cracking, peeling, chipping, delamination in a detention environment. So back to one of the first quotes, are we giving up quality? No, we're probably enhancing quality. We're giving you options that you wouldn't otherwise have in conventional construction. Now, that's all fine and good, and you have options. How, and back to Joe's original presentations, how do I negotiate? What do I need? How do I determine if I want to do prefab, and then if I do, what prefab method? Well, manufacturer's qualifications, you're going to hear a lot about that. Check out your people. 2, in a true prefab world, there are modular and industrialized building programs. Does your potential prefab supplier comply with Indiana's or Missouri's or anybody's state programs? Testing. I will touch on testing in another slide in just a minute, but there are tests for paint adhesion, paint burning. Not that it should happen in a jail, but then there's ASTM impact testing for someone trying to beat through the wall, beat through the ceiling, beat through the door. What's your glazing? What kind of impacts will it stand? You should be able to see very clear and concise test reports that says it passes this. This was done to it, and these are the results. They should not take an engineer to read. You should be able, as a lay person, as a user, as a spec writer, just be able to look at it and say, oh, they've tested to this standard, and did it, yes, pass. Excuse me. Verification of past history. Obviously, if you're investing your counties, if you're on a decision committee and you're going to invest for your counties, probably their biggest capital expenditure that will be in your career. Do you really want to be a guinea pig for the Me Too guys and say, oh yeah, I've seen what SteelCell does, I think I can do that too. Or it's just welding steel together, or hey, we've got this other idea, is it tested? No. Have you done it anywhere? No. Well, is that a good bet for your county? Probably no. Part of that it would go to financial soundness. Can this company take on a $4 or $5 million order for product? Because what that means is you're going to have to buy $2 million worth of steel probably, or concrete. Is that company financially sound to do that? Or are they going to ask you, hey, we really don't have the cash, would you go ahead and forward us a couple $1 million so we can get started? Those are the things that should raise the warning signals for you. And the most important thing is probably go kick the tires. Go see these manufacturing plants. Go see their facilities, talk to people that own them. Talk to people that have owned them for 4 or 5 years. That should be in your decision matrix. You should plan on getting in a car, getting on a plane, and going and seeing how these things are built, what the capabilities are, and then talking with people that have used them. And then design the best uses. I've showed you 3 different prefab methods. They all have a very usable place. Don't ask your architect, well, design me something, and ask your CM to get pricing on 3 different buildings. They're all 3 different buildings. That's why you need to go kick your tires, you need to make your decision, then you need to support your architect and design to its best uses. You don't want to design a foundation for a precast cell and then overbuild it just so you can have the option and then put the lightweight steel cell on it. That's a waste of money. All right, performance testing. So, we're going to prefab something out of concrete or steel. It looks thinner. It's not that traditional 8-inch CMU grout-filled rebar reinforced wall. How do we know we're getting something just as good? Well, and I'm not going to walk you through the test reports. Be happy to send them to you if you want, but we were asked, because a lot of jail standards have been written over the years around an 8-inch grout-filled rebar reinforced wall, a CMU wall. They're all over the place, and most of our jails in the 80s and 90s were built that way. So how does a prefab stack up against it? Well, one of the national masonry organizations, and this was under General Shale and Brick, sponsored the test, they actually took their wall to failure and said, okay, well, we see this ASTM standard out there for 600 impacts. We're going to test ours to failure. It failed at 1,134 blows. They made a case for don't take something that failed, that's just at 600. We almost double it. So we were asked to do the same thing. We did not fail, but we agreed with the state of Virginia to stop at 5,025 blows and just say, okay, well, that's so far ahead of your standard. Does anybody want to waste the money to go farther? And their answer was no. We believe you, we get it. This is kind of what the testing looks like, and this is one of the key tests. This is the ASTM F2322. You'll get a survey, you'll have to recall that, so write it down. What it is, it's at least 600 blows, and again, we took it to 5,000, but 600 blows, alternating every 50 between a blunt sledgehammer-like impact object and a sharp pickaxe-like object. And it all has to hit in a 5-inch area. Failure would be a 5 by 5 by 8 cube that could go through that hole. Some expert somewhere says a human body, not my human body, but a human body could get through a 5 by 5 by 8 hole. Now, what I could see is that if the hole's in the right place, I could stick my arm around and possibly manipulate a lock. So this is a forcible egress test. Very, very important when you're looking at any prefab product. Before I turn it over to Craig Alderson with Willoughby, I did want to take an opportunity to answer any specific questions about prefab process, and then remind you, if you just want to touch and feel a couple examples, they'll be out this afternoon for you. Anyone? Or any comments?
Mike,
Yes.
what's your lead times like right now?
Well, lead times are always varying, but obviously we, being an industry leader, we are very busy right now, and it would depend on the size of the project. Our manufacturing plant, the job we were working on last week, we were producing 15 units a day. So if that's a rough idea, and it would just depend a little bit on timing. There is a process where we need to gather all the information. We're going to build this for you off-site, so we need all the information. We need to know what what plumbing pipes are coming in there, what your electrical feeds are going to be, what your voltages are going to be. Do you have an intercom or just a push button? What size light fixture? All those things take a little time to gather, and then we order parts. And then it's just a matter of, timing where we are in production.
To 2 or 4 or 6 manufacturers?
The units per day would change, yes. And it's not straight up 1-to-1. It's not like if we do 15-2, then we do 7.5, 4. It would just depend on the complexity of the cell itself. Joe?
I want to add to your question that he just gave an answer to, and that you asked him how fast can he make them in the facility. I'm going to say there's another caveat to that, and that is how well the detention equipment contractor can get all of his manufacturer's shop drawings in to get them into the architect and the CM for coordination meeting, because we can bid this job tomorrow and you can give him a purchase order tomorrow, and unless I can get the doors and the hardware and the glass all done, he can't make the first sell. So, and that's part of the qualification thing we talked about before. There are some detention contractors out there that are trying to jump into projects and skill levels that they don't have, and they get on these projects, and all of a sudden Mike gets a job and it gets held up for 6 months because the shop drawings can't get approved, and then we have a problem on the job. So I think it kind of all works together, right?
Yep, I would agree. Yes, sir.
Do you have install crews too, or is it mainly the DEC that's installing it?
All right, so his question was, do we have install crews or who handles it? We prefer to use the detention equipment contracting market. Now, the market shrunk, but they're going to be on site because you're going to have a DEC. They're familiar with the operation of the door, which is part of the install process, just making sure that's all correct. And to speak to what Joe said, usually they're involved in the information flow so that we can get into production. So we feel, for the owner's sake, it's a good idea to tie them into the cell package and delivery, because they're part of the success or possible failure of the package. There are a few crews that are around if the DEC market just can't handle it. There are a few other competent crews, but then again, they're just an installer, and they're not going to be involved on that front end of what's the hardware going to look like and what's the glass thickness and things that DECs usually are able to contribute to get us into production faster.
But you have to match up a welder and a crane operator.
Exactly. So you would have to do the coordination. Even if you had an experienced crew, you still have an awful lot of coordination that you would need to work out. And as a manufacturer, we simply do not have that time. We're going to complete your job, be available to service it if needed, and move to the next job because we have eight folks waiting for their cells to be delivered. So to speak to the question, we believe, and our price will reflect this, we believe the DEC is an integral part of getting a correct and speedy delivery of cells. It's the information in, and it's quality install on the back, and coordination throughout the whole. Any other questions? Sam?
Can an existing building be retrofitted with prefab units?
Yeah, actually that's a very good question. We have done in our history at least 5 or 6. We've taken existing buildings, and I'm going to give you the caveat to that, but we've taken existing buildings that range from old manufacturing plants, we did some with CCI, to an old Super Kmart in Rogersville, Tennessee. Now the build level of the Super Kmarts were a little questionable. The floor was about as flat as a basketball, but it really depends a lot whether that building's suitable on the utilities and services, because basically, we're moving in a 200-bed hotel and flushes, and Craig can tell you a little bit about how many times the toilet flushes per day. So you've got to have the infrastructure there. But yes, given that we've got a path into a building and you've got a suitable structure, and you may. We did a Denon CD manufacturing plant. Talk about a dinosaur now. That was the new thing back in my day. No need for big CD manufacturing plants anymore. So they have a big 180,000 square foot building, industrial building, great strong building. We were able to convert that into like a 250 bed jail down in Middle Georgia. And the residents of the county never knew anything was going on until the signage changed on the building. So yes, they are able to go in, and some might say, well, I don't know about the floors. Generally speaking, and I'm speaking generally here, not specifically, if the floor or elevated floor will hold the live load of human traffic, which is about 100 pounds per square foot live, it will probably hold the dead load of the cell. So, you know, pretty, yep. Yep,
Representative with C. Garcia and Associates.
yes, sir.
CM.
Good to see you.
Two questions, if I can. What's your cost comparative to conventional cell construction? I haven't heard that. And second, are those, I saw in your pictures, they're stackable. How high can you go?
Okay. All right, 2 questions, not going to give you exactly the answer you want, but the best I can do. Cell price, if you think about a cell, forget what the wall is. They're going to have toilet light fixture, tension hollow metal, accessories like hooks, maybe a bench, seat. We're probably paying all very similar prices for that. If not, the volume we're doing, we're paying a little bit less. Those things make up about 70% of the cost. So the cost differential that we're talking about is on just the walls itself. I can tell you, when we started this business, you know, in 2001, we were really, you know, precast was still the predominant player. And precast concrete was somewhere around 35, 36, maybe 40, and, you know, somewhere in this neighborhood. I'm not saying I'm exact. $40 a cubic yard. Now, the precast concrete, now I did look this up for a guy the other day, is ranging between 110 and 120. Has steel gone up? Sure. I'm sure everybody's heard of the tariffs, and yeah, it made our steel price go up about 20%. So 30% went up 20%, and the other maybe went up threefold, but it's still 30% of the product. So I would say we're the most cost-effective prefab solution. The stack, well, and against conventional, I mean, right now, the first question is, can you get the labor? And if you can get the labor, you know, do you need, I mean, the cell portion of a CMU construction is the pretty complicated part. There's still going to be plenty of walls that really work well. But I would say, given the time, speed, the supply chain management that would go along with that, you know, again, importing hollow metal in and bringing all the different pieces in and the embeds, I would venture to say we've always been less than conventional construction, but the gap is widening. So it's just, you know, it's just hard to say. And I'll say this, there are options for a toilet that could be a $900 or $1,100 toilet, and ones that can be $2,200, and those things drive it. Now, the other question was, how high can you stack them? Structurally, yep.
Can you give me a percentage? Steel versus concrete cell, and then conventional?
Well, to be honest, I haven't bought a precast cell, but you know, that will be a hard question to answer, because I would be pricing somebody else's stuff. I can just tell you, you know, Joe, we are doing 15 or 20 projects a year. Precast guys, maybe 2 or 3. And it's not because of my good looks or my presentation skills. So, you know, competitive price, we've had to be there to even exist. And again, I think the gap, if there, you know, the gap is widening a little bit. I'm sorry, but the stacking question is another good question. How high can we stack them? They're designed and engineered to stack, I don't know, 6 high. The problem with stacking them 6 high is you could never satisfy the fire exit distances. So we typically never see them stacked more than 2 unless there's a complete, you know, another story of the building built. But, you know, structurally, I mean, we'd go as high as you could work out the fire exit distances, yeah. You just have to traverse, and that gets out of the allowable in FPA.